Ethan Brooks had learned the art of disappearing without leaving a room. You stood where you were told. You smiled when required. And when people like your wife said, "Stay back," you stayed back. The fundraising gala in downtown Chicago was not his world. It belonged to glass, mirrors, and people who spoke in polished sentences. The ballroom glowed under crystal chandeliers, the river lights outside shimmering like they'd been hired for the night. Claire Brooks floated ahead of him, graceful, confident, her hand never reaching back to check if he was following. She had rehearsed this evening all week. "This is important," she'd said during the drive from Wisconsin. "The board will be watching. The new owner is attending. Just, let me handle introductions." Ethan nodded. He always did. His tuxedo was rented. The collar scratched his neck. His hands, rough, scarred, honest, felt wrong holding a champagne glass meant for decoration more than drinking. Claire noticed them in the restroom earlier. She'd grabbed his wrist sharply. "God, Ethan. Your hands." "They work," he'd replied. She'd sighed and pushed a small tube of concealer into his palm. "At least try. These people notice things." He washed it off instead, watching the beige swirl down the sink like it never mattered. Now, in the ballroom, Claire placed him exactly where she wanted him, half a step behind her shoulder, near a marble column. "Stay back," she whispered sharply as executives approached. "Don't embarrass me." Ethan stood still. He listened as Claire laughed at familiar jokes, spoke about leadership and ethics as if she'd invented them. People nodded. Names floated past him like smoke. Then the room shifted. Music softened. Conversations dipped. Heads turned. The owner had arrived. Eleanor Grant moved through the room without urgency, dressed simply, no visible jewelry, which meant everything she wore was worth more than the room itself. She shook hands, smiled briefly, but her eyes were searching. Claire straightened immediately, lifted her glass, stepping forward with practiced charm. Eleanor didn't see her. She walked past the smiles, past the toast, straight toward the marble column. Straight toward Ethan. He felt it before he saw it, the sudden pressure change, like a storm entering the room. Her gaze locked onto him and held. She stopped in front of him. Didn't extend her hand to shake. She took his hands. Warm. Steady. Her eyes dropped, not to his tux, not to his face, but to his wrist. To the pale, curved scar running like a question mark from an accident decades earlier. Her breath caught. The room kept humming, jazz, laughter, the soft clink of glasses, but for one suspended second, everything went quiet. "I've been looking for you for 26 years, she whispered. A glass shattered somewhere behind them. Ethan didn't need to turn to know who dropped it. "I think you've made a mistake," he said hoarsely. Eleanor shook her head once. "No. I haven't." Claire pushed forward, color draining from her face. "Ms. Grant, this is my husband, Ethan. He's an electrician. From Madison." Eleanor didn't look away from Ethan. "I know exactly who he is." A ripple passed through the room. Phones lowered. People stared. Eleanor squeezed Ethan's hands gently. "We'll talk," she said. "Soon." Then she was gone, absorbed into the crowd like she'd never stopped walking. Claire stared at Ethan like he'd committed arson. "What did you say to her?" she hissed. "Nothing," Ethan replied. "She spoke to me." Claire straightened, composure snapping back into place. "Get another drink," she said. "And stay back." But something had shifted. Ethan felt it in his chest like a door cracking open after years of being sealed shut. That night, he didn't sleep. And for the first time in decades, he wondered if he'd been standing in the back because he belonged there. Or because he'd been trained to. He didn't know why Eleanor Grant had been searching for him. But by morning, he would discover that the past hadn't just found him. It had come to expose everything he'd been told to ignore. Ethan Brooks still heard her voice 3 days later. "I've been looking for you for 26 years. The words replayed in his head while he stood at a job site outside Madison, tightening a breaker panel with numb fingers. The warehouse smelled like dust and insulation. The hum of electricity was familiar, grounding, unlike the quiet storm that had followed him home from Chicago. Claire hadn't mentioned the gala since that night. She'd been polite. Too polite. She woke early, dressed sharply, spoke into her phone in low, clipped tones from the kitchen. When Ethan entered the room, she turned slightly, shielding the screen with her body. "You okay?" he asked once. "Busy," she replied, smiling without warmth. That silence unsettled him more than anger ever had. On the fourth morning, his phone buzzed while he was pouring coffee. Unknown number. Chicago area code. He stared at it longer than he should have before answering. "Ethan Brooks?" a woman asked. "Yes. This is Eleanor Grant." His grip tightened on the mug. "I was hoping you'd say yes," she continued calmly. "If you're willing, I'd like to meet." Neutral place. No pressure. There was no drama in her voice. No nostalgia. Just certainty. They met at a diner just off Interstate 90, the kind with cracked vinyl booths, burnt coffee, and a bell on the door that still jingled when you walked in. Eleanor was already there, sitting with her back to the window. No assistant. No security. Just her, hands folded around a chipped mug. "You still drink it black," she said as Ethan slid into the booth. He blinked. "I do." She smiled faintly. "Some things don't change each other. Not the way people flirt. The way people verify reality." "You remember me," Ethan said finally. "I remember everything," Eleanor replied. "That's the problem." She told him she'd come back once years ago. Drove past the old baseball field outside town. The chain-link fence rusted. The bleachers half gone. "But I could still see you," she said. Bottom of the seventh. 2 outs. You didn't flinch. The memory hit him hard, the smell of cut grass, the grit in his mouth, his father's voice before sickness had taken it away. "I told my roommate I was going to marry you," Eleanor added casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Ethan let out a short, surprised laugh. "I couldn't even afford a car back then." "You had something better," she said. "You were steady." He told her why he'd left. The funeral. The bills. The job at the plant that turned into an apprenticeship, then a union card. Life, heavy and unavoidable. "I wrote you," Eleanor said quietly. "I called. I asked around. I never got anything." She nodded, unsurprised. "I know." They didn't dwell on it. They talked about time, about work, about how Rockford and Madison both pretended to grow but mostly learned how to hide damage. She didn't touch him. Didn't flirt. Just listened. When they stood to leave, Eleanor slid a simple business card across the table. "If you ever need help understanding paperwork," she said, "call this number. It's not about money. It's about clarity." That night, Claire noticed the card. "Who's Eleanor Grant?" she asked lightly, folding laundry. "Someone from my past," Ethan said. Claire smiled. Funny how the past shows up when the future's on the line. He didn't respond. Instead, he lay awake thinking about letters that never arrived. And about the last time he'd actually seen his retirement statement. The thought wouldn't let go. Every quarter, for decades, there'd been a thick envelope waiting in the mailbox. Pension summaries. 401k reports. Boring. Comforting. That envelope hadn't shown up in a while. "It's all digital now," Claire had said more than once. "Paperless is cleaner." But the next day, when Ethan opened the desk drawer where they kept important documents, the blue retirement binder was gone. He searched the filing cabinet, the hall closet, the garage shelf. Nothing. "Claire," he called. She came down slowly. "What? Where's the retirement binder?" She frowned. "Why do you need that?" "I just want to look." "It's online," she said dismissively. "You don't need to worry." "I do," he replied. "I always have." For a split second, her eyes hardened. "You've been distracted since that gala," she said smoothly. "Let me handle this." That word again. Handle. The next morning, Ethan stopped by the credit union on his lunch break. The woman at the counter recognized him instantly. They'd gone to the same high school. She typed, frowned, then looked up. "Your mailing address was changed." "When?" "About 6 months ago." "To where?" She hesitated. "A P.O. box." His stomach dropped. "Who authorized that?" She glanced at the screen. "Your wife." "Power of attorney." "I never signed a power of attorney." She bit her lip. "It's on file, Ethan." He drove back to work with his hands shaking on the wheel, every red light stretching too long. That evening, he asked Claire to sit down. "I went to the credit union." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "They say you changed the address. And that you have power of attorney." She sighed, like a teacher interrupted mid-lesson. "It was just easier." "You forget things." "I don't forget my own life." "Don't be dramatic." He asked to see the paperwork. She brought a thick folder, slid it across the table. His signature stared back at him, close enough to be his. "You signed," she said gently. He remembered the stack of forms she'd handed him after dinner. "Insurance updates. Routine stuff." "You said it was standard." "And it was," she replied. "You're reading too much into it." As he flipped pages, beneficiary changes, delivery preferences, his head started to pound. "Ethan," she said softly, "you're getting confused." That word landed harder than anything else. That night, when Claire went upstairs, Ethan sat alone at the table, staring at the paperwork. Then he pulled out Eleanor's card. And for the first time, he wondered not if something was wrong, but how long it had been happening without him noticing. The next step wasn't confrontation. It was confirmation. And once Ethan made the call on that card, there would be no going back to the back of the room. Ethan didn't confront Claire again that night. That surprised him most of all. 10 years earlier, he would have raised his voice. Demanded answers. Let frustration do the talking. But something had changed since Chicago. Since Eleanor had looked at his hands like they told a story worth listening to. Instead of exploding, he slowed down. The next morning, he called the number on Eleanor Grant's card from his truck during lunch. A man answered on the second ring. Calm voice. "No fluff. This is Daniel Rowe." "My name is Ethan Brooks," Ethan said. "I was told you could help me understand paperwork." There was a pause. Not suspicion, preparation. "Tell me what you've noticed," Daniel said. Ethan talked. Slowly. Dates. Missing mail. The P.O. box. The power of attorney he didn't remember signing. Daniel didn't interrupt. When Ethan finished, Daniel said, "You're not crazy." The words landed heavier than any accusation. "What you're describing is common," Daniel continued. "Especially when one spouse controls access. Paperless systems make it easy. Quiet. Clean. So what do I do?" "You document. You don't confront." "Not yet." That afternoon, Ethan stopped at the public library after work. He felt ridiculous at first, Work boots echoing on tile floors, squinting at computer screens like they were written in another language. But he stayed. Daniel talked him through email recovery, security questions, two-factor authentication. Ethan fumbled. Swore under his breath. Got a look from a teenage librarian like he'd offended her ancestors. Then, access. An old email account lit up with notifications he'd never seen. Address changes. Delivery preferences. Beneficiary updates. All time-stamped. All routed away from him. His throat went dry. He printed everything. Page by page. The printer squealed like it hated him, but it kept going. That night, Claire noticed the change before he said a word. The desk drawers were reorganized. Neat. Empty. The filing cabinet in the hallway had a new lock, cheap silver, hardware store quality. "What's that?" Ethan asked. Claire didn't look up from her laptop. "Privacy. It's my stuff too." She clicked her mouse. "Your stuff is in the garage." He checked. The old plastic tote held light bulbs, duct tape, and a laminated church directory from 2011. No paperwork. That evening, Claire sat on the couch flipping through a magazine like nothing was wrong. "I talked to HR Legal today," she said casually. Ethan's stomach tightened. "About what?" "About you." She finally looked at him. "You've been acting strange." There it was. The pivot. "I asked where my retirement statements went," Ethan said. "And I answered," she replied. "Paperless is cleaner. I'm not clutter." She set the magazine down carefully. "Do you want to keep your health coverage, Ethan?" The question landed like a slap. "You've been working fewer hours. You've had headaches. If you start accusing me of things, it creates instability." Instability. The word echoed. She leaned forward slightly, voice soft, professional. "You don't understand how these benefits work." He almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he nodded. "Okay," he said quietly. "Show me." Her eyes narrowed, just enough to register surprise. She opened her laptop and turned it toward him. Logged in fast. Scrolled faster. "See," she said, snapping it shut. "Everything's fine." "That wasn't showing me," Ethan replied. "It was," she snapped, then softened again. "You're not thinking clearly." That night, Ethan lay awake listening to the house settle around him. Not angry. Focused. The next day, he met Daniel Rowe in person at a diner near the old mall. Burnt coffee. Legal pad. No drama. Daniel explained how accounts could be redirected without alarms. How signatures could be bundled into routine updates. How gaslighting wasn't about lies, it was about doubt. "You don't need to be loud," Daniel said, tapping the stack of printed emails. "You just need to be precise." That weekend, Claire hosted a donor brunch at the house. "Just stay upstairs," she told Ethan, arranging flowers. "We're discussing leadership initiatives." Leadership. Ethan almost complied. Then he heard one of the guests say, "Claire, your home is so curated." Curated. Like a museum. Like he was an exhibit no one needed to see. He came downstairs wearing clean jeans, work boots, and a pressed button-down. Claire froze. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Living here," Ethan said. A few guests turned. One older man glanced at Ethan's boots. "Red Wings?" he asked. "Yeah. Good boots," the man said. "My dad wore those." For a moment, Ethan wasn't invisible. That night, Claire cornered him in the kitchen. "You embarrassed me," she said, shaking. "You've been embarrassing me for years," Ethan replied calmly. She scoffed. "You think you're important now because a billionaire recognized you?" He didn't answer. He went to the garage and opened an old box. Baseball clippings. A faded team photo. A cassette tape labeled Summer '96 in Eleanor's handwriting. He held it, not because he wanted the past back, but because it reminded him he used to stand his ground. The next morning, a message came from Eleanor. No pleasantries. Just a time and a place. A quiet coffee shop downtown. She slid a folder across the table. Not money. Process, compliance channels. Documentation steps. Names of people who wouldn't dismiss him. Your story needs daylight, she said. Not noise. Ethan nodded. When he walked out, the folder felt heavy, but useful. Like a tool belt. Claire thought she'd locked the cabinet. She hadn't realized Ethan had learned how to read the wiring behind the wall. The evidence was ready. The channels were open. And the invitation arriving in the mail would give Ethan one chance. To step forward publicly, or disappear for good. The invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope. Ethics and Leadership Awards dinner. Claire Brooks, honoree. Ethan held it longer than necessary. The gold lettering caught the light like it was trying to blind him. Claire's name sat beside words like integrity, transparency, corporate values. He felt something close to pity. Claire planned the evening like a military operation. Timeline. Seating. Talking points. She practiced her speech in the mirror, smoothing her hair, adjusting the cadence of certain words. This matters, she told him. People will be watching. Ethan didn't argue. 3 days earlier, the packets had already gone out, quietly, carefully, through the channels Eleanor and Daniel had laid out. Audit Committee. Outside Counsel. Board Liaison. Time-stamped emails. Receipts. No leaks. No drama. Just facts. The night of the dinner, the ballroom near the river buzzed with confident voices. Glass and steel. People who assumed they were safe. Claire arrived early, clipboard in hand, heels clicking in perfect rhythm. She hugged donors, laughed, kissed cheeks. Ethan came 10 minutes late. Not from nerves. From intention. He wore a dark jacket, clean boots. Nothing flashy. Nothing apologetic. He took a seat near the back. Where Claire always liked him. From the stage, she looked radiant. Untouchable. When she began her speech, the room quieted. At a time when trust in institutions is fragile, Claire said into the microphone, "It's our responsibility as leaders to uphold ethical standards, even when it's uncomfortable." Ethan felt calm settle in his chest. He watched movement ripple across the head table. A man in a gray suit leaned toward a woman beside him. Phones appeared, then disappeared. Claire kept talking. Because dignity in the workplace. A hand went up near the front. Claire, a board member said, standing. May we pause? The room shifted. Of course, she said, smiling tightly. He didn't sit back down. There are questions, he said carefully, that need to be addressed before we continue. Claire's eyes scanned the room. Searching for control. They found Ethan. This is inappropriate, she said sharply. My husband is confused. The word echoed. Ethan stood. Fabric whispered against the chair. Boots touched carpet. Heads turned. I'm not confused, he said evenly. I'm informed. A murmur spread. Mr. Brooks has provided substantial documentation, the board member continued. This is a compliance issue.
Dear friends, I stand before you today to share words that have weighed heavily on my heart.
Email headers. Dates. Policy excerpts. Her smile faltered.
May I have this dance?
This is being taken out of
would be my pleasure,
she said, voice cracking. Ethan stepped forward. I've been in the back long enough to see everything, he said. Silence fell.
Oh my gosh, is that you?
Claire's hand
In the
shook.
flesh, you look incredible.
The glass
A toast
of
to
water
reunions.
on the lectern
Yes.
tipped, rolled, and shattered on the stage. No one moved to help. The board member thanked the attendees and announced a temporary suspension pending review. Claire was escorted off stage, heels clicking out of rhythm. Ethan stayed. When he finally stepped outside, the night air felt clean. Eleanor joined him by the river. "You did it right," she said. "We did it carefully," he replied. Inside, the dominoes were still falling, the truth was out. But the quiet days after would be harder than the public moment. Because reclaiming a life doesn't end with exposure. Ethan moved out the following week. Not in a rush. Not in the middle of the night. He packed what was his: tools, clothes, a box of old photos, the cassette labeled Summer '96. He left the rest exactly where it was. Let the house stay curated without him. The lawyer handled the rest. Because the paper trail was clean, because everything had been done quietly and correctly, the divorce didn't turn into a circus. The power of attorney was voided. Beneficiary changes reversed. Retirement accounts corrected. It wasn't a jackpot. It was fairness. After years of being told he didn't understand numbers, understanding every line felt like winning. Claire lost her job before the investigation even finished. Ethics violations don't age well, especially when they're documented. Around town, Ethan heard the phrase she liked to use on other people, that she was exploring new opportunities. He didn't gloat. Revenge, he'd learned, isn't loud when it's done right. It's final. The quiet days were harder. There were mornings Ethan woke up alone in a small apartment off East Washington Avenue and felt the weight of 30 years settle on his chest. 30 years is a long time to realize you've been shrinking yourself. Some nights he lay awake staring at a ceiling that wasn't his, wondering how he'd missed it. But there were other moments too. The first time he logged into his accounts on his own and understood every line. The afternoon he stopped by the old baseball field and watched a high school game from the bleachers, the crack of the bat still sounding the same. The day he met Eleanor Grant for coffee again. No gala. No speeches. Just a quiet place downtown with chipped mugs and bad pastries. They talked slowly. Carefully. About where they were now, not where they'd been. They didn't pretend they were 25 again. They didn't rush. At their age, you don't chase fireworks. You look for steady light. Sometimes they drove with the radio low, classic rock slipping through the speakers of Eleanor's old SUV. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. That was enough. Ethan thought a lot about dignity in those weeks. About how easily it's given away, one small compromise at a time. About how standing in the back becomes a habit if you're not careful. He hadn't been weak. He'd been trained. At 57, he wasn't starting over. He was taking himself back. One afternoon, he walked past a mirror in a hardware store and paused. Not because he didn't recognize the man looking back, but because he did. The scar on his wrist was still there. The hands were still rough. But now they were steady. Months later, Ethan received a message from Daniel Rowe. Final audit complete. All findings closed. He forwarded it to Eleanor. She replied with a single line. Proud of you. That night, Ethan sat on the balcony of his apartment, city lights humming below. He held the cassette tape in his hands, then set it gently on the table. Some memories are meant to be honored, not lived inside forever. The next morning, he drove to work as usual. Same route. Same coffee stop. Same early start. But something was different. No one told him where to stand anymore. And he didn't ask that if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, quietly pushed aside. This isn't just a story about exposure. It's about remembering who you were before someone told you to stand in the back. Share this with someone who might need it. And if you want more stories about quiet strength, hard lessons, and second chances, subscribe. Some people spend their lives trying to impress a room. Others finally step forward, and take themselves back.